afternoon, everyone. My name is Paul Hutchcroft. I'm Director of the School of International Political and Strategic Studies in the ANU College of Asia and the Pacific, and I'd like to begin by acknowledging and celebrating the first Australians on whose traditional lands we meet and whose cultures are among the oldest continuing cultures in human history. I am delighted to welcome you to the opening session of the Philippines Update 2012, the first update to be held at the ANU since 2005. In a bit, I will have the pleasure of introducing our very distinguished keynote speaker, the Honorable Corazon, Juliano, Soliman, the Secretary of the Department of Social Welfare and Development. First, though, since we're just kicking off the update, I'd like to start by giving a bit of a background on the update and conveying thanks to all those who've made it possible. The genesis of this event can be traced to early 2011 when Marianne Padua and Grace Garcia Bulos of the Philippine Embassy came around and asked whether the ANU might like to do something to commemorate the 25th anniversary of the People Power Revolution in 1986. This led to initial talk of a possible Philippine update, given that there had been so many years lapsed since the last one. This lapse is a reflection of the weakness of Philippine studies, not only at the ANU, but even more so at other Australian universities. In discussions with AusAID about supporting such a venture, we collectively raised the larger issue of how Philippine studies in Australia might benefit from enhanced institutional linkages between Australian and Philippine universities. This remains on the agenda with the clear consensus that a Philippine update would be a good way in which to showcase the rapidly expanding ties between the two countries, one important component of which is the very substantial aid program of AusAID in the Philippines. Well, we're now a good bit beyond the 25th anniversary of the 1986 People Power Revolution, quite obviously, but as discussions continued into early 2012, we agreed that an appropriate focus for the update would be Mindanao, for at least 4 reasons. One, the ongoing peace process between the government and the Moro Islamic Liberation Front, and little did we know that our update would fall on such a critical and hopeful juncture in that process. Secondly, the strong focus of AusAID programs in Mindanao. Third, the breadth of interest that Mindanao would have across government agencies and policy-making communities. And fourth, the large number of AusAID-supported students that come from the Philippines generally and Mindanao more specifically, who study at Australian universities. And indeed, we're delighted that 15 students based at universities outside of Canberra have been given support from our AusAID Update grant to attend the events today and tomorrow. So all of them are from Mindanao and or study Mindanao-related topics, and I want to put out a special welcome to them. In fact, if you're here, please stand up. And we can also have ANU University of Canberra students stand up as well. Let's see what kind of attendance we have there. Oh, come on. I know there's a bunch there. All right, very good. So in order that the insights of our coming conference be disseminated as widely as possible, we will not only have an edited volume that we're hoping to have published early next year and come out both in hard copy as well as in an electronic format. We also have 3 YouTube productions that are coming forth from the conference, one of which is the keynote address that we are about to hear. This update then is a collaborative venture between the ANU and AusAID with critical inspiration from our friends at the Philippine Embassy. And we're delighted to welcome tonight the Ambassador of the Republic of the Philippines to Australia, Her Excellency Belen Anota, as well as many key officials from AusAID, both from here in Canberra as well as Manila. Let me convey our special thanks to AusAID for its support of this update and to the team in Manila that made it possible, most especially Minister Councillor Octavia Borthwick, Governance Advisor Sam Chittick, and Michelle Leonardo, who could not join us, but we know her well. She comes out of the ANU. On this end, there are two people without whom this would not be, and I can't begin to thank them enough. They are Allison Lee, who's busy there in the back, and Olivia Cable, who I think is off running. There she is. Very good. Both of our School of International Political and Strategic Studies. They have worked tirelessly, but I can tell you always cheerfully, in making this update possible, and we've also depended upon the very able assistance of our school's Senior Business Officer, Beverly Williams. So with that as introduction, it is now my pleasure to introduce our speaker, the Honorable Corazon Soliman, who was best known, of course, as Dinky Soliman. I first met Dinky many years ago. I think we figured maybe a quarter century ago, something like that, long before she had entered the government, when she was pressing for democratic accountability and social justice from outside the halls of government, whether in the so-called Parliament of the Streets or through her many advocacies on behalf of civil society. The constant throughout has been her passionate and devoted efforts to serve the interests of those Philippine citizens who have long been marginalized by prevailing structures of power. When government service has not led to that end, she has not hesitated to move back into civil society, as she did in July of 2005 as one of the Hyatt 10, that is, the 10 cabinet members who resigned from the Arroyo administration in protest against evidence that was emerging that the palace had been engaged in electoral fraud. Since mid-2010, Dinky has served her country as Secretary for Social Welfare and Development, the same post she held in the Arroyo government prior to July 2005. Prior to her appointment as DSWD Secretary, she was Executive Vice President of Community Organizers Multiversity, as well as Executive Director of CoTrain. Dinky graduated from the University of the Philippines, Diliman, with a Bachelor of Science in Social Work. At UP, she was a university scholar and a Jerry Rojas Leadership Awardee, and was also among the top scorers in the 1974 National Board examinations for social workers. In 1998, she finished her Master in Public Administration degree at the Kennedy School of Government at Harvard. Dinky is also a recipient of countless awards and citations in the field of social work and community development, most notably as one of the 10 Outstanding Women in the Nation's Service awardee, and also the most distinguished alumnus award from her alma mater, the University of the Philippines. Throughout her career, Dinky has campaigned for popular empowerment and fought for the rights of the disadvantaged. This includes work in Mindanao, appropriate to our focus here in this conference, as she was developing a rural organizing program as a trainer and coordinator in Bukidnon under the auspices of the Social Action Center in the 1970s, presumably in Malaybalay. In the late 1980s, she successfully campaigned for the passage of the Agrarian Reform Law, helping to coalesce the efforts of the Philippine agrarian community. This passion for reform, which, as you'll note, exists whether she is inside or outside of government, is what gives Dinky such a large and enthusiastic following, not only in the Philippines, but also overseas. And in the spirit of popular empowerment, Dinky has agreed to take questions at the end of her prepared remarks. So it is a great pleasure to welcome you here, Dinky, to the Australian National University, and we are honored to have you kick off the 2012 Philippines Update.
Well, a pleasant good afternoon to everyone. And it's really, I'm very honored and privileged to be here in the first update after 7 years. And sa mga kapwa ko Pilipino, magandang hapon sa inyong lahat. This is a story of our journey in the Philippines, mine and many others who have fought for this country to this day. A situationer is always easy to give, but can be devoid of the contextual soul of the country. And so let me tell you a story of 4 decades of struggle. Some of you in this room have been in that struggle for 4 decades and a little bit more for some who are here. And that has led to where we are right now. I hope to not only tell you about the current situation, but also lend you an understanding of the current state of the Philippines. By the way, the photo that you see is a product of a crowdsourced, crowd-driven tourism campaign bearing the slogans, "It's more fun in the Philippines." The tourism campaign follows the current government's belief in the people and in our creative energies. And this is what you might call a public-private partnership, where government provided the platform for citizens' involvement, and citizens from all walks of life were mobilized on their own to use and express their sense of nationalism or their criticism of Philippine governance, politics, and development. What you see is mountain bikes. It's more fun in the Philippines. These are wooden mountain bikes made in the Cordillera, ridden by the Cordillera men in somewhere in the mountain province. I can show you some more pictures. That's really fun at the end of this presentation. This government is giving back power to the people. It is engaging the people more and more in many of its affairs, and it is in fact giving a new meaning to people power. 40 years ago, this would have been thought as anti-developmental when diversity was considered disorderly and criticism as aversion. So let me say that my presentation is outlined with the challenges that we face, the martial law regime, the return of democracy, governance by symmetry, popularity politics, and politics of survival that led us to where we are today, Pinoy's social contract with the Filipino people. So when Marcos came to power, for some of you, you know him. For some of you, you were not even born yet. The Philippines was already poised as an economic power in the East and Southeast Asian region next to Singapore, Hong Kong, Malaysia, and Japan. Actually, Japan and then the Philippines. The Philippines received various development assistance that stimulated economic activities such as infrastructure development and pushed the economy to its standing. The downside, however, with martial law regime was this money disappeared because of Marcos' personal use of it. Marcos consolidated his and his cronies' business interests as well as political power through authoritarian means. He removed the people's voice in decision-making and instead imposed his brand of discipline through the New Society movement. He defined change as he saw it, which eventually led to scores of discontented Filipinos. As a dictator, Marcos had become the leader that lost his vision for the country, and so as far only as his and his friends' feet stood. He was swallowed by his own and his own friends' personal interests. Nepotism, cronyism, corruption were commonplace. His martial law response and New Society movement directly assaulted the Filipinos' people's freedoms and rights. Human rights violations proliferated. Thousands of Filipinos who believed in democracy, including Senator Benigno Aquino Jr. and many others, were incarcerated. Martial law also further marginalized the least understood sectors in Philippine society, such as our fellow Moro brothers and sisters, members of the Communist Party of the Philippines, Democratic Socialist Movement, and other oppositionist groups. That was when the Jabita massacre occurred, which led to the founding of the Moro National Liberation Front, which struggled against the dictator and had caused a lot of the conflicts in Mindanao. And after the Moro National Liberation Front had forged a peace agreement with the Ramos government, which began in the Cory Aquino time, the Moro Islamic Liberation Front, which is the MILF, continued the struggle for autonomy and secession. More on that later. The nation was socially fragmented from various angles: the Christians and the Muslims, the military and civil society, government institutions, and the citizenry. But the Filipino people organized themselves and struggled to win back democracy. They gave the final kick to the dictatorship, which would eventually lead to the first peaceful people power revolution that toppled the Marcos dictatorship. In the end, martial law became Marcos' own undoing. Governments abroad swiftly pulled away and dissociated with his government, which was widely perceived to be oppressive. Cory Aquino, a non-political figure, captured the people's imagination and became the obvious alternative to Marcos. With the church and people backing her, Cory successfully entered the electoral contest, led the opposition to take back government. Key personalities from the Marcos government defected, such as the Defense Minister Juan Ponce Enrile, now the Senate President, and the constabulary head Fidel Ramos later became president, and this was a key turning point that caused the final crumbling of the Marcos government. After the successful people power revolution, Aquino became president and immediately cut the oppression from its roots. The constitution that granted unlimited power to the president. 1987 Constitution was put together and more than anything else pulled several restraints on presidential power, or so at least that it was designed that way, not necessarily succeeding in the implementation. Oversight structures, processes were created, reinforced and re-emphasized, setting in place the structures that would forever bar the institution of a dictatorship. Aquino began to implement economic structural reforms that sought to address the fundamental roots of socio-economic oppressions of many Filipinos. One of the flagship socio-economic programs of Aquino was agrarian reform. And Pancho and I were very much part of the parliament of the streets in ensuring that we have an agrarian reform program. So it was Republic Act 6657, or the Comprehensive Agrarian Reform Law that was passed, and an agrarian reform fund of 50 billion pesos was set up to implement the program from 1987 to 1997. An amendment of the law, the Comprehensive Agrarian Reform Program Extension with Reforms, or CARPER, was enacted, and it extended the implementation to June 30, 2014, and the redistribution of lands 50 hectares and above continues, including Hacienda Luisita, which is continued to this day by the Pinoy administration. The social housing program was also strengthened with the passage of Urban Development Housing Act. The law sought to address the urban housing problems of the homeless and underprivileged Filipinos through improved access to land and housing and the promotion of private sector participation in the government's housing program. Reinstatement of democracy and the government's commitment to human rights provided the political environment that would give rise to the proliferation of non-government organizations. Civil society personalities were actively involved in the writing of the Freedom Constitution. The 1987 Constitution mandated consultative processes that institutionalized the active participation of NGOs, people's organizations, citizens groups in governance process at all levels of social, political, and economic decision-making. The 1991 Local Government Code also highlighted the role of NGOs and people's organizations in pursuit of local autonomy. Aquino resumed dialogue with the Moro National Liberation Front through Nur Miswari. Nur Miswari was the head of the Moro National Liberation Front. The Jeddah Accord was reached and the groundwork for Muslim autonomy was initiated, and it culminated in the creation of the autonomous region of Muslim Mindanao, which is the obtaining situation today. The space also opened up for dialogue with the Cordillera People's Liberation Army, which led to the Cordillera Autonomous Region. Eventually, discussions also opened up as well with the Communist Party of the Philippines and the National Democratic Front. That is a continuing concern and a continuing process today. Fidel Ramos succeeded the presidency in 1992 to 1998, and this is his famous jump after the People Power Revolution with the endorsement of Cory Aquino. As a minority president, Ramos' governance style was described to be full of summits, allowing coordination between and among government agencies, government institutions, and civil society groups. The Philippines blossomed into becoming a tiger economy and raised a budget surplus of 1.5 billion pesos in 1997. This was easily reverted the next year in a fiscal deficit of 50 billion when the financial crisis beset the region. The economic strategy of Ramos, called Philippines 2000, slowly opened up the economy and encouraged the demonopolization of key industries. This invited foreign investments and spurred economic growth to 9% annually. Ramos successfully forged a peace agreement with the Moro National Liberation Front and continued dialogues with other separatist groups such as the MILF and the CPP. An important development during his administration had been the repeal of the anti-subversion law, which gave legitimate standing to our communist brothers and sisters of the Communist Party of the Philippines. Ramos dealt with the poverty issue with the development of a comprehensive social reform agenda that included jobs and livelihood, health, education, skills training, housing, environmental protection through the Philippine Agenda 21, born out of the Rio 1990 summit, protection of children and youth, the elderly, persons with disabilities, agrarian reform, and access to equal opportunity. However, during the latter part of the Ramos administration, controversies plagued the government, such as the big contract deals attended by corruption. Ramos was also aggressively pursuing charter change, leading to a divided elite. The disaffected public sought a people's champ, which was then personified by Vice President Joseph Estrada, a movie personality who often portrayed and was thus seen, rightly or wrongly, as a savior of the poor. And in 1998, Estrada rose to the presidency, winning the elections by a wide margin, defeating Ramos's candidate Jose de Venecia, who was then the Speaker of the House of Representatives, by more than 6 million votes and garnered 10.72 million. Estrada rose to the pinnacle of his political career by virtue of his popularity card. Estrada adopted an all-war policy against the MILF, which was alleged to have led terrorist attacks against civilians, and the policy was an extension of Estrada's macho image. The government policy led to more deaths than peace. This was widely criticized by people in the Philippines and by the international community. During his reign, Estrada's government engaged in cronyism. He was attended to by a shadow cabinet of shrinking bodies who wielded influence in government transactions and policies, defeating some of the reform-oriented cabinet members in the Estrada government, some of whom are stalwarts of the NGO community, such as Boy Morales and Karina David. Estrada's undoing was the Wetting Gate scandal. As a result, he would face plunder charges in an impeachment trial that led to People Power II and his eventual removal as president. Cronyism and corruption during the Estrada's government's rule led to a decline in confidence of foreign investors, also affecting the economy. The fiscal deficit was said to have doubled to 100 billion pesos by the end of 1999, and the growth rate was 3.2%. Gloria Macapagal Arroyo, Estrada's vice president, became the beneficiary of Estrada's ejection from power in 2001. Arroyo was declared president by the Supreme Court, which put to rest the constitutionality of the issues surrounding Estrada's removal. Most of the first 3 years of Arroyo's leadership was a period of healing and seeking justice for the plunder crimes committed by the Estrada family. Arroyo's team initially included civil society crossing over from private sector, from NGO, that includes me, by the people after rejecting a corrupt administration through people power. However, I must admit there was always a constant struggle between the good and the evil forces within the president herself, within the cabinet, within the immediate circle of people around her. This intensified during the 2004 election, in which the forces of evil eventually prevailed. It soon became evident that Arroyo had begun to thirst for more power. Arroyo sought a fresh term and entered the presidential contest in 2004. The 2004 was attended by controversies that challenged the legitimacy of Arroyo's presidency. The most controversial of it was the so-called Hello Garci scandal, where the president was caught on audio tape inappropriately conversing with an election commissioner at the height of the elections, actually at the height of the counting of the ballots of the election. It became clear that the forces of evil had won. The reform-oriented members of the cabinet tried to continue the struggle, but we saw the futility of it and the danger of us being eaten up by it. By then, we had lost trust in the president. So on July 8, 2005, 10 of us, who would be called Higher 10 thereafter, resigned and called for her resignation. The economic managers and the social development secretaries were the ones who resigned. The president's popularity ratings dipped very quickly after that, and Arroyo switched to a political survival mode and used her appointment and budgetary powers to keep everyone in line. Appointments to the elections body, the Ombudsman, and the Supreme Court, among others, were made along political lines. This included the appointment of Mercedes Gutierrez, who served as the president's chief legal counsel prior to her appointment as ombudsman, ensuring that controversies which directly or indirectly involved the president were slowed down or put to a stop, such as the COMELEC Mega-Pacific procurement of automated election systems, the fertilizer fund scandal, the Euro Generals scandal, among others. Gutierrez eventually resigned on the eve of her impeachment trial during the Aquino administration. And then there's the midnight appointment of the Supreme Court Chief Justice Renato Corona, who was just recently convicted of impeachment after it was convincingly found to have he had kept undeclared $1 million and peso accounts contrary to the regulation of public disclosure by public officials. The institutional independence of constitutional oversight bodies had been compromised, affecting a dysfunction in the democratic balance of power. Further patronage practices were blatantly availed to keep GMA cohorts in line, and in the midterm elections of 2007, GMA used government programs and funds such as the distribution of medical cards, fertilizer distribution program, and others for campaign purposes and to cement political alignments. Reportedly, she also distributed brown bags of cash to local government officials during a loyalty check at the palace, and this was disclosed by Father Ed Panlilio, who was then running as governor of Pampanga. The Senate at that time was the only government office critical of the president's actions. Arroyo dismissed the Senate's check and balance function with the issuance of Executive Order 464, which prevented key officials from the executive branch from attending and or answering to Senate inquiries, such as in the case of the NBN-ZTE $1 million deal that Arroyo eventually terminated. Arroyo's pronouncement of a strong republic took shape in the form of civil society suppression. Government issued the calibrated preemptive response policy, which authorized the police to disperse mass actions such as public demonstrations and rallies contesting government policies and actions. Arroyo also issued Proclamation 1017, declaring a state of emergency, and this triggered warrantless arrests of political opposition personalities. During the Arroyo administration, the government's record for human rights violations was reported to have worsened. According to Human Rights Watch 2008 report, the year 2006 saw a sharp increase in extrajudicial killings coinciding with the government's all-out policy against the NPA. Several reports came out that implicated the police and the military to be directly involved in these killings despite the lack of hard evidence. Arroyo was very unpopular throughout most of her second term as president. She received negative satisfaction ratings, reaching an all-time low in March 2010 at minus 53. She was most unloved for the corruption links, the civil society suppression, and human rights abuses. Seeking immunity, the former president sought a congressional seat in the last elections and won in her hometown. Even then, Arroyo is now facing a number of cases ranging from the electoral sabotage to plunder and several corruption charges. She is detained now in the Veterans Memorial Hospital. Her strong republic policies boomeranged back to her and limited her travel as a charged official. President Aquino won the 2010 presidential election on a platform of good governance and as someone farthest linked to the former president. As it turned out, good governance spelled good politics for him. From the time of his assumption of the presidency, Pinoy has maintained the public's trust with very high public satisfaction and trust ratings. Add to this the economic optimism and the confidence of domestic and foreign investors. Standard & Poor's recently upgraded the Philippines' credit standing to just a notch below investment grade. And thus far, forecasts about the Philippine economy have been very positive. The current administration believes that we can address good governance challenges that have evolved from past leadership by nurturing democratic politics, where active participation of the people is key. This would then translate to successfully addressing issues, more importantly, of the poor and marginalized sector. We believe that these are the ingredients to achieving our development targets and would allow for sustainable development and inclusive growth. Aquino's first order of business was to get everyone signed up to the social contract that defines his government's commitment to transparency, accountability, poverty reduction, and an inclusive growth reform agenda. This was lead by example order to everyone in the bureaucracy. A symbolic and powerful demonstration of the government's social contract policy was the rejection of the privileged status of top government officials, or what we call the wang-wang mentality. Wang-wang in our language represents the siren call. It goes wang, 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 and everybody has to go sideways, and it's not an ambulance, it's not a fire truck, it's a government official wanting to pass. And so this is what we are saying. The president ordered all government officials not to use sirens when using their vehicles through the congested traffic of Metro Manila. This message resounded so loudly among ordinary Filipinos, saying that under the current government's administration and in a social contract framework, the boss is the people, and the government officials are public servants. The servant leader philosophy has seeped into the public consciousness. Open government policies have also been adopted, essentially transforming governance into a shared responsibility with private sector entities, be it business and or ordinary citizens. Spaces are provided for citizens groups to occupy, allowing them to have a voice and participation in critical decision-making processes, such as those involving budget and planning. We have a bottom-up budget planning with 609 municipalities, which influences the national budget. We started that with the 2013 budget and will continue to expand in the succeeding years. Development planning and project implementation and audit. Again, a nice showcase is the tourism campaign that the government launched, which instantaneously became viral everyone had a piece to say about what makes the Philippines so much more fun other than tourist destinations. Like what you see, changing address, it's more fun in the Philippines. And most are about the natural beauty of the Philippines, and others are sarcastic and even critical remarks about the country. I'll show you a few more that are funny at the end of my presentation. This government believes in this healthy toss of opinions, celebrating freedoms of expression and speech, which are the key ingredients of a thriving and maturing democracy. We are trying to do now is to learn from the past, transforming the bad practices, and thereby allowing a transparent and accountable government capable of achieving its goals for the betterment of the lives of the Filipinos in the world. At the core of the social contract is the belief that if there is no corruption, there is no poverty. And for the Filipinos, kung walang corrupt, walang mahirap. Initially an election campaign message, this vision is becoming deeply ingrained in the nation's DNA as the government slowly improves on governance processes and programs to become more inclusive of marginalized sectors. In the State of the Nation address this year, the President proudly reported the country's GDP growth rate had reached 6.4%, and the conditional cash transfer program had benefited 3 million households. To be exact, to date, it's 3,087,000 households, serving roughly 7 million plus children, keeping them in school and keeping them healthy, giving the disadvantaged the extra push they need to be more able to participate in the socio-economic affairs of our nation. PhilHealth, or medical coverage, has reached 85% of the population who are poor, and education funding has increased by 15% in 2012. Infrastructure improvements have been increasing at a steady and more efficient pace through effective implementation. In the Pinoy's administration first year in office, the Secretary of Public Works and Highways canceled 900 contracts. He instituted mechanisms to stop leakages. Even the jaded bureaucrats of DPWH admit that a fresh wind of change has blown into the department. This infrastructure plan has been defined until 2016. The Secretary actually carries around these roadmap plans all the way to 2016 in his iPad. So you ask him this road, when will it be finished? As long as it's a national highway, he'll open it and he'll show you the timeline. Government housing for the Philippine National Police and the AFP has been prioritized as a gesture of gratitude to the men and women who have protected our communities and promoted peace in conflict areas. Additionally, as an update, and you can hear more about this from our colleagues who are around, Steve Rude, who was very much part of a process, and Pancho and others, the Moro Islamic Liberation Front has recently agreed on the framework for peace agreement to facilitate a peaceful settlement of the government and the MILF. For us, this is a historic moment and an opportunity to end decades of Moro resistance. This was publicly announced last Sunday, October 7, and the terms of agreements was shared to the people. It's in the official gazette. It's all over the internet, open to criticisms and suggestions before the final agreement signing on October 15. With the agreement, the Moros will be given greater autonomy, but will no longer want to be a separate state. This, for us, will start a very positive development, not only in Mindanao, but for the whole country, but also in the neighboring countries in Southeast Asia. We see this also as an expansion of reach of development projects implemented by the government and other development agencies, especially AusAID, who's been doing a lot of work in Mindanao, to communities in the autonomous region of Muslim Mindanao, such that the delivery of services to the people in Manila is of the same extent to the people in ARM, or hopefully eventually to be called Bangsamoro. We aspire for a day when tourists would plan to go to Bangsamoro cities and municipalities, and that they'd also go enjoy the beach and the sun in Sulu, in Quezon Beach, in Pagudpud, like they would do in Pagudpud in Ilocos Norte, and shop in Marawi City like they would shop in Marikina or Quezon City. To summarize, the current leadership has been determined. Before I summarize, let me just say too, that I think that our brothers and sisters of the Moro region actually had seen the concreteness of the will and sincerity of this government. Because even before the agreement has been signed, even before a framework was agreed upon, many confidence-building actions has taken place, meaning development was being felt in the far corners of the autonomous region of Muslim Mindanao. And I think that has actually shown them that this is a different set of negotiations and that we are going to see very real changes in the area. So to summarize, the current leadership has always been determined in achieving its target. We have seen changes, and for us, working in the government, positive change is our agenda. I quote from the President's social contract with the Filipino people. There you see, that is our target, to have transparent and accountable governance, void of corruption, empowerment of the poor and inclusive growth, invest in people through education, advancement and protection of public health, and delivery of equal justice to rich or poor. Or as he said in his SONA speech the first time, from a president who tolerates corruption to a president who is the nation's first and most determined fighter of corruption. From a government that merely conjures economic growth statistics that our people know to be unreal, to a government that prioritizes jobs, that empower the people and provide them with opportunities to rise above poverty. From relegating education to just one of the many concerns, to making education the central strategy for investing in our people, reducing poverty, and building national competitiveness. From treating health as just another area for political patronage, to recognizing the advancement and protection of public health, which includes responsible parenthood as key measures of good governance. From justice that money and connections can buy, to a truly impartial system of institutions that deliver equal justice to rich and poor. On a personal note, I'm very happy to share with you that I have been part of this journey with the Filipino people, many of whom, as I said, as I started, have also been part of this struggle and this journey, from martial law up to the present time. I saw reform happen as a community organizer in Bukidnon, in the mountains of Bukidnon, and in the coastal lines of Cagayan de Oro during martial law times, as a member of a group advocating for political and economic reforms during President Corazon Aquino's time, and training organizers during President Ramos' time, and now as a public servant. I'm really privileged to be part of this evolving history and to be with the current administration. We are not done. We're facing many challenges, working with renewed hope that a just, compassionate Philippines where truth, freedom, justice, love truly abide. Magandang hapon sa inyo lahat.
Thank you, Secretary Soliman. As I said, Dinky is very happy to take questions. We do have a microphone that we will be moving around. So who would like to start? Please, we got a microphone here. And if you could identify yourself, please.
I'm Dora Sisolanantes. I used to be with the UP. Right now, I'm here at the AMU. I'm really happy with the performance of President Aquino. In fact, it has given me hope that some things really can be done. However, I'm very discouraged by two things, and I hope that you can shed light on these two things. First is the issue of political dynasty, because I was discouraged by the list of senatorial candidates that the government is offering. And if you're going to look at the history of corruption in the Philippines, it's very much associated with dynasty, with political dynasty. And the other one is in relation to the internet, the cybercrime. I think that I'm not I'm not critical of Pinoy. In fact, as I told you, I'm very helpful. But I don't know the implication of these two developments on his firm. Because I think that if you're going to look at the internet, it's really the space that entices young people to participate. And of course, there are other things that are included in the cybercrime law. But can you please shed light on these things? I'm actually hesitant to ask these questions, but I think that these two questions need to be asked. Thank you.
First of all, no one should be hesitant to ask a question. Because as I said, this government celebrates praise and criticism at the same time. Let me answer the cybercrime law. The actual situation is that the law is not yet implementable because it takes 90 days to do the implementing rules and regulation. And the implementing rules and regulation is taking into account what the netizens are saying to be martial law type. And that is one provision of the whole law. Efforts are now being undertaken to amend that. And I think that that particular phrase, for many, it communicates an authoritarian connotation because of the powers vested on the Secretary of the Department of Justice. So that is being amended right now. And as I said, the law is not yet implementable. What I think is being forgotten or is drowned out by the netizens who are so jealous of their freedom are two things. That cybercrime law will now allow us, and particularly the DSWD, to prosecute crimes of cyber pornography. Our children, 5 years old, I know of a case, is being used in cyber pornography, sold for $20, $30 for her to do sexual actions so that other men in other parts of the world can see. Cybercrime also now, we can run after those who do selling of children in the internet. And we can prevent cyberbullying, where in fact, in the Philippines itself, we have a 13-year-old and 14-year-old boys who are partners, they're gays, killed each other because of the cyberbullying that they were experiencing. That's what the law is preventing. That is part of what is not being told. What is being what the netizens' voices is their fear of being charged with libel. And as I said, that's being amended and that's being addressed. But that's what I want people to think about. Yes, that law may infringe on your freedom. But as I always said to some of my friends, if you say there, I am wrong, Dinky Soliman is wrong because of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you cannot be charged of libel. If what you're saying in the netizens is true, if what you're saying as criticism is not to be questioned, I don't think you can be put to libel. But even then, that law is now being implemented, and as I said, that law is now being amended, and it's not yet implementable because the implementing rules and regulation are actually not yet done. But right now, there has been a TRO, a restraining order has been given by the Supreme Court on the law. So even those of us who could use it in prosecuting cyber crimes such as cyber pornography and selling of our children through the internet, we cannot do that now. We have actually been parts of raids. I have been part of raids, and the least that we could charge those perpetuating, the whole system, the internet, the place, is a very minimal fine. And I think it is anti-pornography that is the law that exists, which is very weak. So that's where it's at. On the political dynasty, I think we're all aware, and we know that changes in the political system take time. And for us, the best and the most effective and sustainable change is with the citizens themselves. Active citizenship, where they will vote out the people who they think is not deserving. There was a big debate in terms of the composition of the Senate. A big debate within the Liberal Party. I'm not a member of the party. When we were consulted, we had big debates. But in the end, it was an admission of our own people's, the need of the whole society, particularly our people who are poor, to be able to see and use the ballot again to undertake the change that they want, such as not having brothers and sisters in the Senate, or husbands and wives taking over their seat as congresspeople, as mayors, as governors. In the end, it's the will of the people that will have to be effected. What are we doing to make that happen? One of the things that we are doing is to ensure that we are able to provide for the poor the wherewithal so that they don't have to be dependent on patrons. How do we strike out the patronage relationship? By providing support in the delivery of social services, especially in education and health, including the conditional cash transfer. So I'm sure many of you have probably heard the criticism that I will probably run for the Senate because I'm serving 3,087,000 households. So in politicians' mind, that's times 3. Because that's at least 3 adults about to vote. And I keep saying, no, I'm not, because we're going to finish or reach the National Poverty Household Targeting System, which has a database of 10 million, 5.2 million are identified as poor through a household profile assessment that we conducted and a proxy means test that determined poor and non-poor. We have identified of the 10 million, 5.2 million to be poor. Of the 5.2 million, we are serving 3,087,000. And when we last run the eligibility check, that means are there 0 to 14 years old in the household, that the total number against 5.2 is 4.6 million. So by next year, we hope to cover everyone. But that doesn't mean that the job is over, because we are actually investing on children to finish elementary so that they have a better chance to participate in inclusive growth. Because the parents and the grandparents of these children whom we are serving are likely to have not finished elementary, more so high school, so that they are very dependent on patrons in their communities. So we're breaking that, and that's why in the beginning, there was a lot of resistance from politicians on this program. Because now they know the people do not have to go to them to borrow money for schooling, to borrow money for medicine. They now have the conditional cash transfer, which allows us to give $7 per child per month for as long as the child goes to school 85% of the time, up to 3 children. And about $11 for mothers so that they will go either as pre or postnatal care for them and bring the babies 0 to 2 to be able to do weight monitoring, immunization, nutrition counseling, and for them, pre- and postnatal care. And so in a month, if you have 3 children and the mother, you roughly have $7 plus $11. That's what you get every month, and we give it bi-monthly. And so that really gives them the power to be able to say, okay, I have a choice. I don't need to vote for you because I don't have to depend on you. But that's a very subtle and conscious message, but the politicians already know that that's the effect. And so that's part of the effort, because after that, the other agencies kick in with sustainable livelihood. So in other words, if we are able to reduce poverty, we are able to cut patronage relationships, we are able to cut political dynasties. At the same time, I think there are enough civil society organizations in the Philippines who are engaged politically and who are trying to bring in new leadership, fresh leadership. And one of the things that we are trying to do is to say in local governance, in local politics, mayors, governors, that you can have a Jesse Robredo in your midst. Jesse Robredo, for who are not familiar, is the Interior and Local Government Secretary who crashed 40 days or so ago. And he was mayor of one city in the Bicol region, and he transformed for 19 years from a very unprogressive, gambling-ridden, unorganized city to a to a first-class city, and is now full of investment, and people are thriving. It's become an education center in the region. And in that 19 years, he did not enrich himself. When people saw his house during the wake, they were also surprised to see a very simple house in Naga, where he stayed the whole time. So that's the other part of the effort to break dynasties. It's to make sure that people see that there are enough leaders in the country who need not belong to a clan who's been in politics for long.
Desiree Desierto from the University of Mindanao. So just a follow-up question on the CCPs. First of all, I commend the DFWD and the Aquino government for really enlarging the scope of the CCPs. I mean, of course, there's a lot of evidence from abroad that how CCPs work to reduce poverty and improve human capital. But there's this point about hypothesis, I think, which has not yet been proven, that CCTs are supposed to decrease patronage. It seems like commonsensical, but I don't know whether there's really clear evidence here. There is clear evidence, however, actually really very recent paper, 2012, and this is a really statistically sound paper. It basically shows that those who received CCTs during 2008 to 2009 prior to the 2010 elections were more likely to vote for candidates who were incumbent politicians. And the effect was large. The effect was basically an incumbent politician had a higher vote share that was about 26 percentage point higher. It's not percentage, it's percentage point. So in terms of patronage, I mean, I wonder if it's just going to, I don't know, replace something, the old system with the new one. Because it seems as though poor people, you know, when they receive CGPs, they feel like, you know, it's showing up in both patterns. So that's quite alarming because, I mean, the implications on basically on political electoral competition is that I feel like for political economy reasons, even though CCTs are supposed to be a temporary program, I think it would be hard to really stop it for could take on the regions. But, you know, I just want to throw out that I want you to be aware of that current paper that we have, and wonder if you have some other evidence which can back up, you know, the hypothesis that actually CCTs would decrease patronage.
First of all, it began in 2008 and 2009. And therefore, if the study is to look at 2008, 2009 patterns, it was barely there. It was only covering 321,000 in 2008 and covering roughly another 300,000 in 2009. The obtaining situation then too, it was begun by President Arroyo. And we continued with it, but enhanced greatly the systems and the mechanisms to ensure precisely that it will not be used by politicians. What are the steps that we have taken to do so? One, there is a grievance redress system that we put in place in 2010. And the grievance redress system uses SMS, so there is a number they text, uses email, and uses what we call snail mail, they can mail, and also they can report to media. And whatever it is that they find wrong with it, including people who have been included who they think are not poor, people who they think are using the money in the wrong way, or families that are should be included but are not included. All of that have come into our system, and we have delisted 71,000 families who were found to be non-poor. And we have also included families, and it's a continuing number. We're close to about 150,000 families who were not included in the enumeration in the National Household Targeting System or did not appear in the community assembly, which is the first step to get you registered. Now, why am I explaining this? Because obviously, in the first time of registration, 2008 and 2009, the association of the people is that this national government program was brought to me by the local government and by the administration. And that's a natural conclusion. Once we have instituted the grievance redress system, we also made a strong communication pitch to say that this is a national program. Every month, part of the condition is for all the people who are part of the beneficiaries or the partner families of CCT to attend family development sessions. It's done in villages, so it's about 30 to 35 people attending. And we have a curriculum that talks about responsible parenthood, talks about disaster risk reduction. It talks about me and my community. And me and my community includes active citizenship, where rights and responsibilities are discussed in those family development sessions. We began with family development sessions with municipal links. Municipal links are project people whom we hire, and it's one municipal link to 800 families. So we have quite a number of people in the field. But now we have started with AusAID and Asian Development Bank to engage civil society organizations to actually conduct the family development sessions, because we think that that's more effective, they're more, that's their charisma, and that we do not have all of the people to manage those kinds of sessions. So I am addressing the concern by saying that there are some steps that we are consciously doing that communicates that this is not because of your mayor, your governor, or any politician. It's a national government program. And for this election, before he passed away, Secretary Jesse and I already had done a memo circular which prohibits local politicians to put up their tarpaulins or their advertisements in events that we have for conditional cash transfer. And I have followed it up with another memo circular, which we did last August, that anybody who is part of the department, whether you're contractual or you're a permanent person, I get a complaint naming the circumstance and you, as part of a politicking act, you will be suspended and an investigation will be done after we have suspended you. I have suspended two, and an investigation is undertaken. In other words, everything that needs to be reformed in our political system will take time. And it's incremental. And it needs many more citizens' voices to help our poor people understand that it is their right and their responsibility to ensure that we have good public servants that are elected. So maybe Pulse Asia or Social Weather Station can do a study later on the voting patterns in conditional cash transfer areas.
Arnel Guntero from Cebu City and student at the Crawford School of Public Policy. Aside from the CCT, what are the other programs that were implemented during the Arroyo administration that the present administration recognizes as good and is vigorously pursuing right now, preferably without qualification?
First of all, I don't think there's any program from the Arroyo government that we are pursuing without modification and enhancement. Everything that we are pursuing now is modified and or enhanced. So, for example, the department that I lead is a very professional department. We are implementing programs across administrations. So, one of the other programs is community-driven development, where the communities themselves identify the priority problem, they identify what projects should be undertaken. There's an indicative planning figure that is provided them. They agree on the criteria and they allocate the money as a municipal assembly, the mayor being a facilitator. The money goes directly to the community account. It does not go through the local government unit. This is something that was started in 2001 in my first tour of duty as a public servant. That was continued when I left, and we continue to do this now, and we're going to even increase it to be a national community-driven development program, which will involve more people, and we will be using it and working also in the arm area for this. And I think for us in the department, we continue to also implement sustainable livelihoods, which was started 15 years ago. But we have enhanced SEAK, or Self-Employment Assistance Program, by using the framework of community-driven enterprise development. And the community-driven enterprise development is part of the Sustainable Livelihood Program, where the people themselves look at what enterprises they can actually start off. We provide them the technical know-how, the assessment of the resources that are available, and provide them a no-interest, no-collateral loan that will be used for capacity building to manage the enterprise. Agriculture is a totally different thing. They're starting on very basic rice. Coconut industry are the two main drivers of agriculture. And ecotourism is another driver for the economy that's being done, all to generate jobs.
Good afternoon, ma'am. My name is Francie Carion. I am a journalist actually from Zamboanga City, but right now I'm a PhD candidate for peace journalism at the Center of Peace and Conflict Studies of the University of Sydney. I would like to make a follow-up line from the first person who asked the question on the Cybercrime Act. Although my concern is actually on the eventual, hopefully the eventual passage of the Freedom of Information Act, because as you said, one of the first thrust of the Aquino government is for transparent, accountable governance, and yet it seems to me that it runs in conflict with also the laws that are the law that has just been recently passed of the Cybercrime Act, and yet at the same time the non-passage yet of the Right of Information Act, which is still pending right now. And we are hoping really, I mean, I'm speaking a bit for my colleagues in media back in the Philippines, that we are really hoping that this law will be amended. The Cybercrime Prevention Act will be amended a bit, especially only with the provision on libel, especially since we are also fighting for the decriminalization of libel. The situation right now among Philippine media is that we have issues on job security, not only on safety in the job, but really economic security plus our risk in our lives. And so this provision of the law would add up to that issue on job security. So, but I am hopeful that with your statement, which I hope I can quote, that it is not yet being passed. It is not really implementable yet. So we hope that there would be positive action on that in the future. And my question, I'm sorry. My question is actually on the second part of your thrust, on the thrust of the Philippine government, which is the second and third, empowerment of the poor and the investment on people in education. And this is my question for you, actually, on the social welfare, as head of the social welfare department. Ma'am, I just visited actually a town in Basilan, and this is Albarca, and I would like to know if there are programs already that have been planned for that area, because Albarca right now, according to the mayor, is not receiving any ERA, and so they cannot put up development programs, especially for education. There is one barangay there there is one village there that we have gone to, and the literacy rate was extremely low, and the situation among the people were also is really very disheartening. Maybe know what is the social welfare department's.
First of all, let me answer the last one because that's easy. In Albarca, we have 1,200 beneficiaries of conditional cash transfer in the Albarca area itself. And the situation of why they are not getting the ERA is because they were created illegally by the Regional Legislative Assembly of the Autonomous Region of Muslim Mindanao. So there is no basis for national government or even ARM to give them the ERA. They were receiving in the past from the Office of the President of Arroyo. And that was then not based on any law. And that's what they were trying to make the President Aquino do. And President Aquino said, we are precisely wanting to correct the wrong dispensing of funds. That's why we cannot give you the funds. The RLA, the Regional Legislative Assembly of the Regional Autonomous Region of Muslim Mindanao, must legally create you first. And once you're legally created, then the ERA will come. But despite that, we, the national government agencies, have been supporting some of the efforts there. And just to add to what I've just said, 1,200 beneficiaries in Albarca itself of the conditional cash transfer. We have also been providing them food packs, because in Albarca there continues to be skirmishes between the Abu Sayyaf, so this is not the Moro Islamic Liberation Front, and the soldiers. And just recently, last week, we provided another 100 sacks of rice through the Claretian fathers who are working there. Because precisely, as you pointed out, the mayor himself cannot do much because he does not have much money. So national government is coming in through non-government or faith-based organizations such as the Claretian Fathers, and through the governor, who is also providing some support to the town. On the anti-cyber pornography, under cyber crime law, as I said, what I said was it is not implementable because it needs a 90 days for implementing rules and regulations to be done. And they are doing that. Simultaneous to that, there are already two efforts, one in the Senate and one in the House, to amend the particular provision on libel. The decriminalization of libel actually there is a Supreme Court ruling already that do not put you to jail if you have been found guilty of libel. And I know that because I had a libel suit against me after I resigned from government. And for 5 years, I was going back and forth to court, having to be arraigned and defend myself against one of the Congress people who was associated with the former president. And my case was dismissed before the Aquino administration took over. But I was already advised that if I was found guilty, I will not be put to jail because there is already a Supreme Court ruling that libel should not, even if guilty, you should not be jailed. The most that you should be given as penalty is fine. However, it does not diminish the fact of what you have said, that we do want to protect our journalists from these kinds of harassment. So the anti-cyber crime law, as I said, is being amended. And right now, it cannot even be implemented in its entirety, including the good provisions, because now there's a TRO issued by the Supreme Court on implementing the law. On the Freedom for Information Act, that has been already done by the President as priority. I mean, he has said to the Legislative Assembly, both Senate and the House, that it is a priority for him. I really think that laws are to be done and to be undertaken by the legislators. So I really believe that citizens' action on the legislators should be increased. It's not the president nor the executive who does the law. It's the legislators. So we have to have more active advocacy with them. And in 2013, let's not elect legislators who do not know how to make laws. So that's the way to do it, to make sure that what we have in the Senate and in the House are people who can make laws. And I think that's part of what journalists can do. Help, the society by thinking about the kind of legislators who are there. Because in the final analysis, it's them who make the law and the executive executes. That's how we are set up. It's not like here where the members of parliament are elected and then they become ministers. I mean, it's different, as you know. And I think that's one agenda that we can work on together. Let's do our lobbying and our advocacy and hold them accountable, the legislators who make the law.
Okay, we have about 5 minutes left, so we have one more quick question in the back there. You can identify yourself, please. Yeah.
My name is Jojo Benaves, and with the University of Hawaii.
Hi, Jojo.
I really, admiring the active government to commit itself to winning corruption, but in this puzzle, the big elephant in the room has never been addressed. what is the government going to do with the Marcoses? This is a family that has stolen $15 billion from the country, basically destroyed, our adulthood. But I have not heard anything yet in terms of corruption, in terms of, dealing with the corruption of the Marcos government. So can I get an official explanation as to what this government is going to do, with the family that plundered my country for 15 years?
The PCGG still exists, and they're doing very quiet work to get evidence. Because the courts continue to try outside of the Philippines, and there has been decisions already done on this. I think the challenge really is to follow cases and get evidence on this and make sure that our courts can actually prosecute. And part of getting there is to clean up the courts. And cleaning up the courts, as a first step, we have our first woman Chief Justice, who is a young person who will stay there for 18 years beyond all of us, and I hope she can get Marcos to pay. So, but at the same time, I think it is for us to appreciate too, and try to break political dynasties, patronage culture, because as you said, despite the fact that the Marcoses have plundered us, and there are a significant number of people who believe that they should be put to jail or held accountable, the son is a senator. He won by the numbers of votes that he got. He's not even number 12. He's somewhere between number 8 and number 9, if I'm not mistaken. The mother is a congressman elected in the Ilocos region, and the daughter is the governor of the Ilocos region. It's not just the courts. It's ourselves. It's the Filipino people needing to know that we must hold them accountable. Because until that time comes, it will be difficult for the system to just be the one to make a judgment. Because as you all know, we are, as Secretary Butch would always say, we have to perform as we reform. So those of us who are there, we have to deliver as we are trying to change the system. And so this is one aspect that is probably an ongoing quiet battle. But as we're doing this ongoing quiet battle, we really need to battle the hearts and minds of the people. Because having elected Bongbong makes him now a candidate for presidency in 2016. And we better get our act together to make people remember what the Marcoses had done to us. This is the challenge. And I agree with you, Jojo. We should hold them accountable. We've been trying to for the last so many years. Our system and our the justice system, the electoral system, and our people still need to remember that we have to hold them accountable. And that's all our work. That's not government, that's not CSO, that's all of us. We need to ensure that in the electoral process, the democratic struggle continues. And that's where I think the agenda of poverty reduction, which is part of my work, comes in. For I think as long as we're able to make more people break out of patronage, the higher the chance that a truly democratic system will exist in the Philippines. And you're all part of it. Thank you.